Hello everybody, what's up? Welcome to my workshop. My name is Ramon and I'm a professional rod builder from the Netherlands. In this video I'm gonna show you how I build a 10 weight fiberglass fly rod, and I will also tell you how you can win the giveaway of a custom rod of your choosing with a budget of up to $1,000. Without further ado, let's get into the content. As you can see right now, I am gathering the parts that will make up the handle of this rod, and I'm laying it out to get a preview of how I want it to look. Once I am happy with that stage, I will move on to the next step. And the next step on this project is to shape the foam core to the desired shape and size. In order to do that, I have to sand the grip down, so I place it on a mandrel and secure it into the chuck of my power wrapper. I place a box behind my power wrapper so that when I'm sanding, the dust particles don't go flying all the way through my workshop. However, before I start sanding, I will first mark out where my hands will be placed on the grip. This will give me a good indication as to how I need to shape the grip and where exactly I need to shape it. Whilst I'm sanding it to the desired shape, I will constantly check throughout sanding by placing my hand on the foam core to check if it still feels comfortable. Once I have the desired shape and size, I will then take off the foam core from the mandrel and start cleaning the workstation. Even though I placed the box behind the power wrapper to catch some of the dust particles, in the near future I will be investing in a lathe with a dust collector, but for now I have to make do with what I have. The next step to make this carbon grip a carbon grip is to get a carbon sleeve and attach it to the foam core. Depending on the type of carbon grip, I will use either an epoxy rod glue or a regular rod building epoxy. In this case, I will make an epoxy coated carbon grip, therefore I will be using the same epoxy as I will coat it with later on. I will now start applying some epoxy to the foam core until it will stop soaking in and form a nice layer on the outside. Once this is done, I will then put some gloves on and put the carbon sleeving over the foam core. By using tie rips on the outside and some electric tape over the sleeving, I will minimize any gaps that will come between the sleeving and the foam core. Doing it this way will ensure there will be no gaps between the carbon sleeving and the foam core. Once I've left it to dry for 48 hours to ensure complete curing of the epoxy, I will now take it out and remove the electric tape. Before moving on to the next step, I will then inspect the grip to make sure there was indeed no gaps between the sleeving and the foam core. If it passes the test and there is no gaps, it's time for the next step, the first layer of epoxy. The way that I do it is to apply a very thin first layer so that you just seal in the carbon sleeving, and to ensure there will be no bubbles, I will torch it heavily after and then place it on a rod dryer to dry. As you can see, all I did was apply a very thin coat of epoxy and the carbon grip is still very rough. After 4 hours I will take it out of the rod dryer to apply the second coat. My goal with the second layer of the epoxy is to fill in all the gaps between the carbon sleeving and to make sure that the carbon grip will be as smooth as possible. After I've done this, I will torch the grip with the wet epoxy to make sure there will be no bubbles left. As you can see, the grip is already a lot smoother than it was when we applied the first coat, but it is yet to be as smooth as we want it to be. After 48 hours, the epoxy is now cured completely and it is time for the next step, which is to sand the grip in preparation for the third coat of epoxy. In order to do that, I have to put the grips on a mandrel once again and secure them by placing some tape underneath the grips, so when I start sanding they will be stable. The first thing I have to do is cut off the excess on each end of the carbon grip. Once I start sanding, it is not my goal to destroy the carbon sleeving underneath, but solely to try to smooth out the grip as much as possible and get rid of the most of the high spots. This can be quite a tricky process, as if you sand too deeply, you will ruin the carbon sleeving underneath and it will show once you apply the next coat of epoxy. I then take a final pass on each end to make sure that all ends are completely flat and ready for the next coat of epoxy. Once you are done sanding, the grips should look something like this, where the ends are flat, the whole grip is flat as well, it's matte, it's been sanded down and it's ready for the third coat. I will then mix up a new batch of epoxy and take a big flat brush to apply the next coat. The big flat brush is quite an important element to getting a smooth grip, as when you use a smaller brush you will be seeing the brush strokes and you will get an uneven or wavy finish. I will then let it dry for another 48 hours so it will cure completely. This is what the grip should look like after the third coat. It is not perfect yet, but it will be getting another coat of epoxy. I'm sure some of you thought that, hey wait, those grips look kinda good, why are you sanding them again? Well, since I'm a professional rod builder and my clients are paying a lot of money, I need to make sure that those grips are absolutely perfect. Now that I've sanded the grips down till they're perfectly smooth, it is now time to apply the fourth layer of epoxy. This will ensure that the grips will look absolutely perfect and will be crystal clear and super smooth to the touch. But not slippery, mind you. Epoxy is not slippery at all. It still gives a lot of grip to the angler. You will see once I apply all of the epoxy how good the grips will look in comparison to the third layer. Just like with the previous coats of epoxy, it is now time to torch the epoxy to make sure that there will be no bubbles in the finished product. The grips are now finished in terms of applying epoxy. The fourth layer has made them crystal clear and perfectly smooth. All they need to do now is cure completely. It's now a couple days later, the epoxy is completely dry and it's time to inspect the grips. I am very pleased with the end result. The grips are completely clear and smooth like I was hoping to, and they have the right shape and size. Now that the grips are finished, it's time to start the next stage of the rod building process. Assembling the handles. For the handles I need something more than just the grips. I also need a reel seat, a butt cap and a winding check. Since we made our own grips, we need to adjust them to the rest of the components. So we have to sand them in order to fit the butt cap and the reel seat. Fitting the reel seat is a little bit more tricky than the butt cap, as this is a recessed reel seat. So in order to make it fit, I will first start with a big drill bit and make a hole for the reel seat. After I've done that, I will then take out the Dremel to adjust the hole even further so that the reel seat will fit snugly into the hole. As you can see, it is a really tight fit, so I'm happy with the result. Now that the front side of the reel seat is taken care of, it's now time to adjust the rear grip to the rear of the reel seat. All I have to do for that is to make the rear grip flat in the front so that it will fit the ring on the back of the reel seat. I will then test fit the rear grip to the reel seat to check if I've done my job. Now that I've adjusted all the grips to the rest of the components, it's time to make the hole of the grips bigger so that they will fit the blank. We do that with sandpaper on sticks, which are called reamers. Once I made the holes of the grips large enough so that they will fit the blank, I will then test fit once again all of the components, but now on the blank. Before gluing all of the handle parts onto the blank, I will first sand it so that the glue will have a better bond to the blank and the rest of the components. I then take a piece of paper towel and I put some isopropyl alcohol on it. This will disinfect and completely degrease the blank so that the bond with the glue on the handles will not be compromised. Now that the blank is nice and rough for the glue to stick to, it is time to roughen up some of the metal components on the handle section. It's quite difficult to roughen up the metal parts, but in order to do this, I use a really rough sanding paper and a round iron file. I'm not only trying to get through the paint, but I'm also trying to scratch the metal surface of the components. This way the glue will have a proper grip on the metal parts. Once every component has been sanded, it is time to start gluing the handle sections and component together. To glue up the handle section, I use Rod Builder's Republic Tough Glue, as this is one of the best glues I've used to date. Once the epoxy glue has been measured out and mixed thoroughly, it is time to glue up the handle section. To make sure there will be no gaps in between the butt cap and the rear grip, I will put on some tape to hold it together. Then it's time to fit the reel seat. Because the reel seat has a couple of millimeters in between the blank, you fill up the gaps between the blank and the reel seat. Although the skeletal reel seat looks very cool, it is a nightmare to glue up. Glue will get everywhere between the gaps and you have to clean it out very thoroughly, or else you will see it once the product hardens. Once the reel seat is in position and has been cleaned, I apply some glue in front of it and slide on the foregrip. This is what the rod looks like after the glue up. It is now time to let the glue dry so that we can start wrapping the rod tomorrow. Alrighty, it's the next day, the glue is dry and I took off the tape so that you all can see what the handle looks like. Before I can start wrapping the rod, there's a few things I need to do. One of the things is to find the spine on each piece of the blank. The way that I do that is by taping up every piece and then rolling them between my fingers and the table. That way you will feel the blank hit a certain point where it will stop. Every blank has multiple spines. Most of the time they are opposite of one another. So one is up, one is down. But they can also be one down, one left, one down, one right. It all depends on the blank. Once I've marked all the spines on all of the pieces, it is time to mark where the guides will be. For this rod I have a custom guide spacing that I made myself, which I will leave in the description below. After we've marked out where every guide will be, it is time to prep the guide feet for wrapping. When you have an untreated guide feet, it is very thick and very hard to wrap your thread on it. That's why we sand down the guide feet a little bit for the thread to come up on the feet easier. Now we have done all the prepping before wrapping. I put my power wrapper together again and take out the blank and put them in between the rod rests. After I've done that, I will attach the guide feet to the blank with some electrical tape. One side of the double-footed guide will be a full wrap of tape. The other will be a small piece of tape so that the thread can run up the guide feet without any issues. On the guide which are not double-footed, I will use a small piece of tape on the guide feet itself and place a piece of tape behind it. That way, once your thread starts running up the guide feet, it will not slide backwards. Finally, we can start wrapping. I'm starting at the butt of the rod where the decal of my brand will be. I'm doing a gold metallic inlay with a white outer band. On the guides I'm doing exactly the same thing, white outer band, gold metallic inlay, but I don't wrap the metallic inlay on the guide feet, I do it in front of the feet. Once you wrap up the feet, all I want is solid thread. That will make the strongest connection for your rod and it will make the rod the most durable it can be. To protect the ferrules from cracking, I will place a wrap on both the male and the female section of the ferrule. Here you can see an example of another double-footed guide where I place the inlays before I go up the guide feet. I think that wrapping guides is one of the most boring parts of rod building, as you often have to repeat the same pattern over and over again, sometimes 20 plus times on the same rod. Lucky for me, this rod has some single-footed guides in the tip section, so I don't have to wrap that much this time. After I have wrapped all of the running guides, it is time to wrap the tip guide. For that, I need this black device, which is called a blank extension. Wrapping the tip is always a tricky process, especially with a power wrapper. By hand it is a little bit easier, but I am used to the power wrapper, so I'm wrapping it on that. Same thing as with the guides and the ferrule wraps, I will be doing a white outer band and a golden metallic inlay. This is a tip-top guide without a stem, so I wrap my thread onto the tube of the tip-top guide. This way it will be more secure. Even though it is a very tough spot to lay a tight wrap, I try to do my best to get the best results. Everything's wrapped now. Now it's time to make sure that all the guides are in line and aligned with the spine. The best way I found to do that is with your eyes, to stare over your blank into a well-lit white background. This way any small imperfection will show. Once I am happy with the guide alignment and the placement of them, then it's time for the first layer of epoxy on all of the thread wraps. I will measure out 2 equal components of both the resin and the catalyst. In this case I am using the Gen 4 low build. The package always states that you have to stir gently, but I go a bit more rough. I do get some bubbles in the cup, as you can see, but I will pop them all with a torch. To get the best finished result, I usually apply epoxy on my Alps power wrapper at around 180 to 240 RPM. This is only the first layer, so all I'm trying to do is soak the threads with the epoxy. On the guides it's exactly the same thing, but I try to push my epoxy in between the guide feet and the blank. So I will apply a little bit more epoxy on the guide feet and really try to push with my brush so that the epoxy will get underneath. Exact same thing here for this guide, except for this one was a little bit wobbly, which makes it harder to apply the finish nicely and evenly, but we got it done. Single foot guide makes life a little bit easier. It's really fast to apply, but once again you can see I try to apply a lot of pressure on the guide feet to make them soak in the epoxy. Now that I've showed you some up close, I will do the rest of them with the time lapse. That way the epoxy won't set up on me, and I will do everything with one mixed batch. As you've seen before, there were some bubbles in the batch, so that's why I'm now popping them all with a torch, and this is what it looks like after I've applied the torch to them. All of the bubbles have popped and there's very minimal epoxy on the guide wraps, just enough to soak the thread. Now that the epoxy is applied, you can also really see that metallic trim band come to life. It's time to let this cure for a couple of hours and then apply the second coat. I won't be showing you the whole measuring and mixing process, you've seen that by now. There's been some bubbles in this batch as well, but I will now apply a second coat of epoxy on all the thread wraps, but now in a time lapse and not with close-up shots. What I will do, however, is show you close-up shots of all the thread wraps which are now coated in the second coat of epoxy after I've torched it and popped all the bubbles once again. It is now completely clean, just a little bit more epoxy on it, which will cover all of the little bumps which were there before. This is not the final coat yet, so there's gonna be one more. It's now the next day in the morning and it's time to apply the decal in front of the foregrip. This is a water slide decal, so I first have to place it in water. This way the glue will come loose and then I can place it on the thread wrap. I put some water on it to get it into the right position. Then I pat it dry with a paper towel. And this is what it looks like before the epoxy goes on it. The decal is in place, it's time for the third and last coat of epoxy. I've measured it all, mixed it all, and now I'm applying it in a time lapse. This is the very last coat. I'm very happy how it turned out, and I really like the final result. It's a fiberglass plank with a skeletal reel seat and carbon grips. What's not to like? I'm gonna show you the final results now. Enjoy. Alright, that was fun and all, but let's get down to business. What is the $1,000 giveaway and how can you win it? Well, the $1,000 giveaway is a custom rod made by me to your choosing. So whether that be freshwater, saltwater, any type of rod, jigging, tuna, sea bass, GT, carp fishing, zander fishing, vertical fishing, pelagic, fly fishing, you name it. Whatever you like, I'm gonna build for the winner. With a budget up to $1,000. So that basically means no budget at all. The best blanks, the best guides, all the way like you like it. So colors, handle sizes, type of handles, anything you like. How can you win it? Well, the first thing you have to do is like this video and subscribe to the YouTube channel. If you've done that, you have to like my Instagram page, of which I will leave the link down below in the description. And once you've done that, the very last thing I want you to do is to comment down below what type of rod you would like if you would win and what your Instagram handle name is. That way I can contact you once we reach 1,000 subscribers. Because once we hit 1,000 subscribers, I will give away the $1,000 custom rod to one of you guys. I will be picking the winner through a random comment selector so that there is no funny business and then it's all for a game for everybody. This was my very first rod building video. There will be much more content coming like this in the near future, so stay tuned for that. I want to thank you all for watching all the way until the end. Good luck on the giveaway and I'll see you next time. This was fun and all, but I really made a mess. God damn it.